All right, hey everyone, Mr. W here. Our lesson today is how to turn fractions into decimals. And we'll be using a calculator today just to keep things a little bit easy. And so our main idea for today is just that to turn fractions into decimals, we're just going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So, for example, fractions would be 3/10 is an example of that, with a numerator on top and a denominator. And here's your model of 3/10. Decimals on the right side here would be 0.3. Notice your decimal point. This would read also as 3/10. And the relationship between fractions and decimals are kind of like the relationship when you tell time between your regular analog clocks and a digital clock. This time here is 9:35, and so is this, is also 9:35, but notice it's quite different. So fractions and decimals kind of have a similar relationship. Your fractions have numerator and denominators. Your decimals, our number system, when we use calculators and computers, needs to show fractions. It's not always easy to show that digitally. So that's, instead of numerators and denominators, we get into this whole idea of place value with tenths and hundredths and thousands. And we'll get into that more just a little bit later. So, okay, so let's try this first one. I'll show you how we make 3/10 into 3/10 as a decimal form. We just say that we divide the numerator, which is our 3, by our denominator of 10. So we're going to push divide by 10. And that would equal 0.3, which is read as 3/10. All right. Okay, so turn the fraction into a decimal. So we're just going to divide 1 divided by 2. So 1 divided by 2 is equal to 0.5. Now this would read as 5/10 because that's in the tenths place value. Now the question is like, well, wait a second, that's, has a 2 and that's 1/2 and that's a 5. But remember, this is an equivalent fraction. So for example, if I were to write the 5/10, right, over here as a regular fraction with a numerator and denominator, 1/2 is an equivalent fraction to 5/10, and this is also 5/10. Remember, that's another lesson, but remember we would just have to multiply 2 times 5 would equal our 10, right? And then whatever we would do on the bottom, we would do on top. So 1 times 5 is 5. So just keep that in mind that sometimes it's an equivalent fraction and the numbers will look different, but the value will be equivalent. Okay, let's try 3/5. And our step is to divide the numerator by the denominator. So 3 divided by our 5. And that would be 0.6. So we would read this as 3/5 is equal or equivalent, right, to 6/10. And remember, we could find an equivalent fraction by multiplying. So when it's decimals, it's not always exact, but it is an equivalent fraction. Okay, let's try 1/4. We're going to take 1 divided by 4 is equal to 0.25. Now you would read this as 25 hundredths because that 5 is in the hundredths. Again, this is an equivalent fraction. Remember, if I were to multiply the 1 by 25, it would be 25, and the 4 by 25, that would be 100, and this is 25 hundredths. Okay. So 3/4, if we want to go from fraction to decimal form, right, we would go the 3 divided by our 4, right? And that would be 0.75. And we would read this as 75 hundredths. All right. Now, I haven't talked too much about eliminating repeating decimals, so let me just show you real quick, and then we'll stop on this page. So 2/3, and we want to change it from a fraction form into decimal form. So same step as before. We're going to divide 2 divided by 3. And see how we have a lot of digits here? So it would be 0.6666. And we don't need to write all of those because they're repeating. Is all you have to do is just write your 0.6 and then just draw a line over that. And that line means that that 6 repeats. So we could just say that 2/3 in fraction form would turn into 6/10 with a repeating decimal in decimal form. Okay. All right, let's try our 5/6. So we divide 5 divided by 6. And here you can see that we have 0.8, but then your 3 repeats. Okay, so we would just write 0.8. And then the 3, we're just going to say that that 3 is repeating. So this would be read as 83/100ths, and that is an equivalent fraction to 5/6. Okay, just a few more, we'll be done. 7/8 is not going to be a repeating decimal, but I just wanted to show you an example of when you have 3 digits. So 7 divided by 8, and see how we have 0.875. So they're not repeating. A lot of times, a lot of teachers will say, you don't have to go beyond the 3 place values, your decimal place values. This would be read as 875 thousandths. Okay, and just one more. 10/11, excuse me. And if we want to change that into decimal form, we go 10 divided by 11, right? And that would equal 0.90. And you see how the 90 keeps on repeating? So we would just draw our line like that. That would read as 90/100ths. Okay, well, hopefully this was helpful today. Just remember the main idea is just divide your top number by your bottom, and that's how you can turn a fraction into decimals. Okay, thanks everybody, and we will see you next time.